I need someone people notice the moment he walks into a room, my girlfriend said during a rooftop party while ignoring me for her charismatic coworker. I left early without a scene. Months later, she arrived at an event and realized I was the person everyone had come to meet. I need someone people notice the moment he walks into a room. She said it like I wasn't standing 3 feet away. Like I was furniture she'd stopped seeing months ago. I held my drink, watched the city lights blur below the rooftop railing, and said nothing. Because what do you say to something like that? She wasn't talking to me. She was talking to Erica, her best friend, who had the grace to glance in my direction with something close to apology. Lauren didn't. At the time, I thought she was talking about a fantasy. Some idea of a person she'd constructed in her head. Months later, she'd discover there was a difference between wanting someone people notice and understanding why people actually remember them. That difference cost her everything. The party was on the 14th floor of a building in Midtown that belonged to someone Lauren worked with. I don't remember whose idea it was to go. Probably hers. These events were always hers. The networking mixers, the industry happy hours, the casual but not casual gatherings where everyone was quietly performing for everyone else. I went because I loved her. That's the honest answer. Not because I enjoyed them. Not because I felt at home in those rooms. I went because Lauren lit up at these things, and for a long time, watching her light up was enough for me. The rooftop had string lights and a bar card, and that specific hum of people talking slightly louder than necessary. It was late September, just cool enough to feel intentional, like the weather had dressed for the occasion. I was standing near the railing when Trevor arrived. I'd heard about Trevor before I ever met him. He was a senior consultant at Lauren's firm, 6 years older than her, and according to every story she'd told me, he had a way of making any room feel like it was orbiting him. Confident without effort. Funny without trying. The kind of person who remembered your name the first time and your drink order the second. I didn't dislike him. That's important to say. He was fine. He was charming. He walked onto that rooftop and within 4 minutes had 3 separate conversations going and 2 people laughing at something he'd said across the space. I watched it happen from the railing. And then I watched Lauren watch it happen. That look on her face. I'd seen pieces of it before, scattered across the last few months. But that night it was whole. Complete. Unguarded. She wasn't trying to hide it. Maybe she'd forgotten I was there. Erica caught up to her near the bar, and they leaned close the way women do when they're sharing something they don't want overheard. I wasn't trying to listen. But the rooftop wasn't large, and Lauren has always had a voice that carries. I need someone people notice the moment he walks into a room. I heard it. I felt it land. And I stood there at the railing and looked out at the city and stayed very, very still. Colin found me about 20 minutes later. Colin has been my best friend since college. He has a gift for reading rooms and an equally developed gift for knowing when not to say anything. He stood next to me at the railing with his own drink and looked out at the same view. "You good?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. He didn't push. That's what I appreciate about Colin. We stood there for another few minutes. Below us, the city kept moving. Cabs, pedestrians, delivery cyclists weaving between cars. All of it indifferent to whatever was happening 14 floors up. I finished my drink. I said goodbye to Lauren. She was mid-conversation with Trevor and a small group that had gathered around him naturally, the way people gather around warmth. She squeezed my arm without looking at me. I took the elevator down. I walked 3 blocks, found a quiet bar, sat at the counter, and ordered a burger and a beer and watched a baseball game I didn't care about. No scene. No confrontation. No dramatic exit. Just a man getting off a rooftop that had stopped feeling like somewhere he belonged. If you enjoy real stories like this, subscribe, because what happened next changed everything for me. Lauren and I had been together for 2 years and 4 months when that night happened. We met through mutual friends at a birthday dinner. Marcus had invited us both, neither of us knowing the other would be there. She was funny and warm and direct in a way that felt refreshing. I liked her immediately. I was 34 at the time we started dating. She was 30. I worked in infrastructure consulting, the unglamorous kind, the kind that involves a lot of spreadsheets and project timelines and very few moments that make good party conversation. Lauren worked in corporate communications, which is the exact opposite. Her entire job was making things sound compelling. We lived in separate apartments for the first year, and then she moved into mine. It was good. For a while, it was genuinely good. The first shift I noticed was small, easy to dismiss. Her firm had hired Trevor about 14 months into our relationship. She mentioned him the first week like you mention any new coworker. Briefly, practically. He was leading a project she was supporting. He was sharp, she said. good in client meetings. By month 2, his name was appearing in more stories. By month 4, his name appeared in most of them. I wasn't suspicious in the traditional sense. I didn't think she was lying about anything or hiding anything obvious. What I noticed was subtler and, honestly, harder to address. She was measuring things differently. Social events. Conversational ease. The way someone carried themselves in a crowd. She started noticing when I was quiet. I've always been quiet at parties. It's not anxiety, it's preference. I observe before I engage. I think before I speak. These are not qualities that read as magnetic in a room full of people performing versions of themselves. Trevor was the opposite. And somewhere in those 14 months, Lauren had started to see my quiet as absence rather than presence. The comparisons started arriving without being named. Small things. Trevor gave this presentation last week without notes. Not even a slide deck. Just talked for 40 minutes and had the whole room. I remember saying something like, "That's impressive." She looked at me like I'd confirmed something. I didn't ask what. Then there was the dinner with her colleagues, 6 of them, including Trevor, where I spent most of the evening listening and asking questions, and Trevor spent most of it telling stories about a ski trip he'd taken and a client who'd flown him to Dubai. He was entertaining. The table was entertained. In the cab home, Lauren was quiet. Then, "You barely said anything tonight." I was listening. You could have participated. I thought about that for a long time afterward. Not with anger. With genuine curiosity. Because I'd asked the colleague next to me about her daughter's college applications, and we'd had a 15-minute conversation that she'd clearly needed to have. I'd learned 3 useful things from the man across from me about a regulatory change coming through the city council. I'd had what felt like real exchanges with real people. But Trevor had told better stories. And Lauren had kept score. I didn't realize it then, I told Colin weeks later. But she's been redefining what she wants. And she's using him as the definition. Colin looked at me carefully. "Do you think she knows that?" I thought about it. "No," I said. "I think she thinks she just wants more. She hasn't figured out that more and different aren't the same thing." Here's the thing about working in infrastructure consulting. Nobody at a party ever wants to hear about it. "What do you do?" is a social question with a social contract attached. You're supposed to answer in a way that makes the other person feel something, curiosity, admiration, maybe a little envy. The job description has to do work. I help cities and counties build the systems that keep things running, does not do that work. Neither does. Right now I'm 18 months into a project renegotiating a public utility contract that will affect water access for about 400,000 people. Those answers produce polite nods. Trevor said things like, "I help companies tell their best story," and rooms lit up. What I was actually doing, across those months, was building something. Not dramatically. Not in a way that made a good rooftop conversation. I'd been quietly developing a proposal for a mid-sized regional infrastructure project, a partnership model between private consultants and a public agency that, if it worked, would change how a significant portion of the Northeast approached aging systems. I'd spent 8 months on the structural framework alone. My business associate Damien had come on as a strategic partner. We'd brought in Hudson as a mentor, a man who'd been doing this work for 30 years and had forgotten more about public-private negotiation than most people in our field had ever learned. There was no flashy version of what we were building. It was just careful, sustained, unglamorous work. Lauren knew I was busy. She knew I was working on something significant. But in the way you know something that hasn't been translated into a language that feels real, like knowing a city exists that you've never visited. She couldn't see it. And eventually, I think, she stopped looking. We lasted 3 more weeks after that night. It didn't end in a fight, exactly. It ended in a conversation that had been postponed too long, where both of us said things that were honest and overdue and painful, and then it was over. She didn't mention Trevor. I didn't ask about him. I moved her things to the entryway. She came with Christina, her sister, on a Sunday afternoon when I went for a long walk. I came back to an apartment that was mostly mine again. I sat on the couch. I thought about the 14 floors and the string lights and the city below and what she'd said without knowing I could hear. Then I went to bed. I got up the next morning and went to work. That was it. That was the whole breakup. No social media posts, no mutual friend campaigns, no dramatic public grief. Just a closed chapter and a Monday morning. Colin checked in. Marcus checked in. I told them both I was fine, and I mostly was, not because it didn't hurt, but because somewhere in the last few months I'd already started grieving something. The end of the relationship was just the confirmation of a loss that had been happening in slow motion. "What are you going to do?" Marcus asked. Work, I said. He laughed, then realized I was serious. That's it. That's what I have right now, I said. Might as well make it mean something. 6 months is a long time. Long enough to finish something that should have been finished months ago because you were spending your energy on the wrong things. Long enough for a partnership model to become a pilot program. Long enough for a pilot program to attract institutional attention. Damien and I filed the framework in November. Hudson made 3 introductions that I would never have been able to make on my own. To Mason, who directed regional planning for the agency we were targeting, and to Sawyer, who was quietly looking for exactly the kind of investment vehicle we'd structured. By December, we had a letter of intent. By February, a signed agreement. It moved faster than I expected. It moved faster than anyone expected, actually, which became its own kind of attention. The infrastructure world is small and specific, but it is not invisible. When something works, people notice, not the way they notice a viral video or a personality that commands a room, but the way you notice when a foundation is solid. Quietly, durably, with increasing confidence. Mason started including me in conversations I hadn't been invited to before. Sawyer introduced me to Logan at a board meeting as the person most worth knowing in regional infrastructure right now, which was generous and slightly embarrassing, and which I filed away without repeating. Bennett, my attorney, started laughing at our calls. You understand what's happening, right? He said one afternoon. Tell me, I said. 6 months ago you were a consultant with a proposal. Now you're a consultant with a track record. People are calling me asking about you. I sat with that for a moment. Good calls or concern calls? I said. Good calls, he said. Mostly people who want to work with you before someone else does. I didn't post about it. I didn't change my profile photo. I didn't craft a narrative about the journey. I just showed up to the next meeting. I heard things through the network that connects people who don't mean to stay connected. Valerie, a mutual friend who moved in overlapping circles without ever choosing sides, mentioned Lauren once over coffee in March. She seems different, Valerie said carefully. Different how? Quieter, maybe. A pause. I think things didn't go the way she expected. I didn't ask for specifics. Valerie wasn't offering them. What I understood, from that conversation and from a few other fragments that arrived without my seeking them, was something like this. Trevor's magnetism was a specific kind of thing. It worked at parties. It worked in presentations. It worked in the first 5 minutes of any encounter because he was genuinely skilled at those 5 minutes. What it didn't do was sustain. Attention, I have observed, is a renewable resource for people who perform. But performance is exhausting to maintain and exhausting to be around. The 7th party feels different than the first. The 10th story about a client in Dubai has a different weight than the 2nd. Lauren had wanted a man who filled a room. I don't know if she'd started to understand yet that filling a room and holding it are different skills entirely. Erica reached out to me in April. Just a brief message, checking in, saying she hoped I was doing well. I replied that I was. She didn't explain why she'd sent it. I thought about Lauren reading that exchange, and then I stopped thinking about it. The call came in May. Harper was the organizing director for a regional infrastructure summit, an annual conference that brought together public agency directors, private consultants, investors, and a handful of civic leaders. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't covered by mainstream media. It was, in its specific world, significant. She wanted me to deliver the keynote. I sat with the phone in my hand for a moment after she said it. I want to be honest with you, I told her. I'm not a speaker. I've presented in rooms. I've done panel discussions. A keynote is different. I know what you are, Harper said. You're the person who actually built something this year. Those are the keynotes that matter. I thought about Hudson, who'd said something similar 3 months earlier. The most compelling thing a person can do in this field is show the work. Not describe it. Show it. I said yes. The next 6 weeks were preparation. Grant, who'd been doing infrastructure keynotes for 15 years, walked me through structure. I worked with Qley on the supporting presentation. Madison helped frame the narrative in terms that would land for the civilian-adjacent attendees who'd be in the room alongside the industry people. I didn't tell many people I was doing it. Colin knew. Damien knew. Hudson would be in the audience. I didn't post about it. I didn't need to. The summit was held on a Thursday evening in June at a venue in the city, a converted event space in a building I'd walked past 100 times. I arrived early and spent an hour in the back reviewing my notes. Natalie, the event organizer, ran through logistics. The room held about 300 people. Industry professionals, civic leaders, a handful of journalists, including Sophia from a publication I'd been cited in twice in the last year. Brooks, the executive director of the hosting organization, shook my hand near the entrance and said, "We've been looking forward to this one." I thanked him. I found a quiet corner and went over my opening for the last time. At around 6:30, the room started filling. I was in that corner, reviewing notes, when I heard Natalie speaking near the entrance in a tone that indicated someone had arrived who she wasn't certain should be there. I glanced over. I saw Lauren. She was there with Valerie and someone I didn't recognize. I learned later that Valerie had invited her. Valerie had a professional connection to one of the panel sponsors and had received 2 extra passes. Lauren hadn't known what the event was specifically, only that it was a professional networking summit of some kind. I watched her move through the entrance. She was scanning the room the way people do at events where they're not entirely sure why they're there, looking for anchors, familiar faces, something to orient herself around. I stepped back into the corner. I wasn't hiding. I just wasn't ready for that conversation to happen in the middle of everything else I was preparing for. She didn't see me. I watched the room continue to fill around her. I know what happened in the crowd before I took the stage, because Damien told me afterward. He'd been watching from a different angle. Valerie and Lauren were standing near the registration table when a woman, a project manager from one of the city agencies, stopped and asked Valerie, "Do you know if he's here yet? Is he speaking first or after the panel?" Valerie, who knew I was there but had decided not to say anything, answered vaguely. Lauren asked who she meant. The woman described what I did, the project I'd led, the partnership model that had been written about in 3 industry publications in the last 2 months. Lauren didn't connect it. Not yet. They moved into the room. Abigail, the charity organizer who'd partnered with the summit for their community infrastructure initiative, recognized Valerie and came over to say hello. Abigail asked if they were excited about the keynote. "Honestly, I don't know who's speaking," Lauren said. Abigail smiled. "He built the whole framework for the pilot program. It's the most significant regional infrastructure development we've seen in years. I don't know how you describe it without it sounding dry, but being in a room when he talks about it, it doesn't feel dry." Lauren said something politely interested. Abigail moved on. A few minutes later, Lauren overheard 2 men near them, Sawyer and Carter, though she wouldn't have known their names, talking about the keynote. "He doesn't talk the way consultants usually talk," Carter said. "He talks like someone who actually understands what he built." "I've been in this field for 12 years, Sawyer said. "There are maybe 5 people I'd rearrange my schedule for. He's on that list now." Lauren looked at Valerie. Valerie was quiet. "Who are they talking about?" Lauren asked. Before Valerie could answer, the lights shifted slightly, the subtle dimming that signals an event is about to begin. Brooks took the stage and gave a 2-minute introduction. He talked about the project, the partnership model, the impact, the specificity of the work, and the rarity of someone who could execute that kind of vision at that scale. Then he said, "It is my genuine honor to welcome tonight's keynote speaker." And he said my name. I walked out from the side of the room. 300 people were looking at me. I didn't look for Lauren in the crowd. I decided that before I walked out. Whatever was happening on her side of the room was not something I could carry on to that stage. I stood at the podium. I looked out, and then I just told the truth about the work. Not a performance. Not a story curated for applause. Just the actual account of what we'd built, why it mattered, what we'd gotten wrong along the way, what we'd learned, and where it could go. I spoke for 42 minutes. I didn't use notes after the first 5. When I finished, the room was quiet for a moment. That specific silence that happens before people realize it's over, and then it wasn't quiet at all. Sophia caught me near the stage afterward and asked for 15 minutes. I said yes. Wesley, a business consultant I'd met once at a panel discussion 6 months ago, shook my hand and said, "I owe you an apology. I told a colleague back in January that I didn't think this project would get off the ground." "Most people thought that," I said. "Most people were wrong," he said. Hudson found me next. He just looked at me for a moment and then nodded once. From him, that was everything. I didn't seek Lauren out, but events have a way of making space small. It was about 40 minutes after the keynote, during the networking portion, when I turned from a conversation with Olivia about the community application layer of the project and found myself 3 feet from Lauren. She was standing still in a room full of people in motion. She looked at me. I don't know what she was expecting. Discomfort, maybe. Distance. Something that would allow her to read what she'd done as minor and easily absorbed. I felt none of those things. I felt steady. That's the only word for it. The way you feel when you've been doing hard work long enough that you've stopped wondering if it's worth it. "Hey," I said. "Hey," she said. Her voice was careful. "I didn't know you were," she started. I know, I said. There was a pause. You were incredible up there, she said. The sentence landed like something she'd rehearsed, and then realized, midway through saying it, was the wrong thing. Not wrong because it wasn't true. Wrong because it was too late to be the right version of true. Thank you, I said. Parker came over to introduce me to someone across the room who'd been trying to connect with me all evening. I shook Lauren's hand, an odd gesture, formal and honest at the same time, and said, "Take care of yourself." And I walked away. Not dramatically, not to make a point, just because there was somewhere else to be. Christina called me 2 weeks later. Lauren's sister. We'd always gotten along. She was direct in a way Lauren wasn't, said things without the social packaging. "She's not doing great," Christina said. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, and I meant it. "She understands now," Christina said. "What she missed? I think she understood at the moment they said your name." I thought about that. What did she think she was missing before? I asked. "Someone the world pointed at," Christina said. She didn't understand that there's a difference between being pointed at and being sought out. I let that sit for a moment. "How are you?" Christina asked. "Good," I said. "Actually good." She laughed softly. "I know. I could tell. Erica sent me a short message the following week. For what it's worth, I always thought you were the most interesting person in any room you were in. Lauren just didn't know how to see that." I read it twice. Replied, "Thank you. Really." Then I closed the app and went back to the proposal on my desk. There was more work to do. There was always more work to do. And I had learned, over those months, that this was not a burden. It was the point. Colin asked me, around that time, whether I felt vindicated. I thought about the question seriously before answering. "No," I said. "No. Vindication implies I was trying to prove something," I said. "I wasn't trying to prove anything. I was trying to build something. Those are different projects." He considered this. "What if it had all failed?" he said. "What if the program had collapsed and nobody came to the summit and you'd just been a guy who worked hard in private and nobody ever found out?" I shrugged. "Then I'd still have built something worth building," I said. "The room doesn't determine the value of the work. It just determines who finds out about it." Colin smiled in the way he does when he thinks you've said something he wants to write down. "She missed it," he said quietly. "She chose what she could see," I said. "I can't be angry about that. People choose what they can see." What Lauren had wanted was someone the room turned toward the moment he arrived. She'd found that in Trevor. The immediate tilt of attention, the magnetic pull of presence, the specific pleasure of standing next to someone everyone was watching. What she hadn't understood was that there are two kinds of gravity. The kind that pulls people toward you in a moment, and the kind that makes people rearrange their schedules, change their plans, call ahead to make sure you'll be there. She chose the man who owned every room he walked into, and walked away from the man who eventually built the one worth being in.